Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. We're going to do the custom micro build tips, and what you see in front of you is 3 of my micros that we've built that have gone through a couple of different iterations, and I thought I'd share some of the things that I learned along the way and things that might benefit you, that you don't have to spend the money or time trying to do the things that I've done, and you can possibly get flying a little bit happier and a little bit sooner. So let's clear this off. Let's talk about the tools. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. My tools are all about as inexpensive, with the exception of one, that I can get. So these are all generic tools that I have either laying around that I already had, or that I picked up for almost nothing. And here's my ultra fancy glue gun that had to have been about $5 or $6. And my soldering iron. The only thing that's special about this, well, it does have a fine tip. It can change out tips. And then I've also got a temperature selector over there, although I'm never really sure which side it's on, but I've got it. So you don't have to spend $100 or $300 on any particular tool or set of tools. This tool is the PA09, and it is a crimping tool. And I decided to get this just because I wanted to start making my own ends, and this is the best way to get started. So you don't have to have a bunch of fancy tools. Now let's clear this off and get down to something else. Let's talk about the frames. That's kind of your first basic choice when it comes to building. And you see I've got kind of 3 distinct different ones. Those motors keep getting stuck together. We've got a classic H-frame, which is this little 80mm. We've got an X-frame, which is this picnic quads. Well, this is a picnic quad too, polycarbonate. And it is a traditional X-frame with a double tab bottom plate. And then we've got the Quantum Wisp. Now, the things that you need to consider, and this is all just my opinion, of course. I don't have any scientific data. This is from running many flight packs through these. This is my least favorite frame. It doesn't matter if I've got fresh motors and just make a new hot battery on this thing. This one just doesn't have as much thrust as either of the other two. So I can't change heights with this nearly as much. So I have to really prepare for whatever the next gap I'm going to shoot is going to be, or I just have to pass it by and circle around for the next pass or go do something else. And my theory on why that is because there's quite a bit of frame it's blowing down on, and it's round, it's flat. So whenever you're creating thrust, it does have these gaps it can shoot, but it's also blowing against the frame in all these spaces. So its thrust is kind of minimized. My favorite is the traditional X, and this frame not only has a minimal amount of air, but it also is bigger than the Wisp by 10mm. This is 120. But this one has the clearance for the props, and it's also got relatively thin arms. There's not a lot of resistance, so your thrust goes down to help you propel you rather than going against the frame that it's trying to carry itself. But I do also like this H, but I don't find this H to be as maneuverable. And it's probably, again, because it's blowing down a little bit of its thrust on the frame, although I don't notice it nearly as much on this frame as I do on the Wisp. So these are 3 kind of basic different frames. Some would say that this is an H frame or an X frame, and it kind of applies to both, just because if you look at the way the arms are, it's a little bit of an X. You've got the X through here, but it's also a little bit of a traditional H because the motors are at the front of the back. So when you're choosing your frame, you might depend on your kind of flight. Like if I'm flying indoor, this is kind of my favorite because I need to keep a steady height for the most part, and I'm not going to be flying really fast and forward, and I'm certainly not going to be trying any acrobatics with this. I've tried acrobatics with this, and I'm not efficient at acrobatics by any stretch, but I find that the loops and rolls with this are require more height, and it takes more time to gather, even though the weight is very, very similar. All 3 of these weigh pretty close with a battery to about 65 grams. So you'll also notice on these that I have changed from the micro loci that comes on a lot of the batteries Micro-Losi, if you don't know, is this one here. And I've gone with the JST, and I bought that crimper and a bunch of ends for this purpose. If you look at this one, you'll also notice that I changed the gauge on the battery to 18 gauge rather than what came traditionally on these, which I think was probably 26 or so. Let me see if I can get this in the camera here. It's pretty hard to see, but it's right down there. Doesn't want to focus. Can we get that? Too much movement, the print's too hard. It's hard to read with your naked eye. The theory behind that was that Benedict over at Micromotor Warehouse talked about running 8mm motors, and to be most efficient needed 3 amps, 3.3 I think was the actual number. And in order to get that much amperage, you didn't want your battery lead being the limiter. So he suggested running 18 gauge on all his, so that's what I do. It wasn't that difficult, and it was a little bit of a fun task learning how to crimp and how to maneuver those 18 gauge wires down inside the JST housing. So that's the challenge. It's not easy. Those JSTs, I don't believe, are actually made to run 18 gauge wire in it. I think it's made to run 22 or 24. So your flights, depending upon what kind of flight you want to be doing, you may want to choose one frame over another. And the nice thing is, you can take this stuff off. You don't have to have 3 quads to fly. Say you start out with the Wisp and you find that it's a little too docile for you, or you're experiencing a limit of thrust, or you want to just test to see if you can get more thrust out of a different frame. You can pluck everything off of here easy enough, and then spend $15 on a new frame and put it on it. So you're really not out much. The board that I've been using, if you've seen many of my videos, is the SciSky. Some people are calling it the SciSky. I don't know. It seems like it's SciSky to me. And it's a good board. I think some people have had some troubles getting it to bind. There have been some reports of accelerometer issues, but I think that has to do with the software that's running. I've experienced accelerometer drift, but that's curable. You just run a different version of either cleanflight or betaflight, and it seems to take care of the problem. When you mount these, if you're mounting them on carbon fiber, you got to get them up off there, usually using foam tape, because if you get any of these solder joints and it touches your frame, it'll short with carbon fiber, because carbon fiber does carry electricity. So you've got to use something to get up off the frame. In the case of polycarbonate, you can go right down to the frame, and I just use hot glue to secure it to the frame. It's pretty basic, pretty simple. You want to make sure you center the accelerometer, because that'll make sure that you yaw accurately. You don't get kind of a loop or some sort of oval shape. It has the ability, if the accelerometer is, to really yaw straight on itself rather than making some long loop. Let's step back to the battery leads. You'll see on all of mine, except for this one, that the battery leads are soldered on the top, and I would suggest soldering it on the bottom. And then if you look at this, you say, well, geez, how's that calibrate the accelerometer for level? You can take care of that in cleanflight. The board does not have to be level. You can tell it what it should know is level. So I suggest mounting your battery lead to the bottom, and that is because that clears the space you need to plug in the USB port. With these that I have soldered on the top, I'm always having to spread these wires out and push them down, and then they bump up real hard up against these wires, and I'm worried it's going to either knock the socket for the USB port loose, or it's going to pull one of my battery leads loose. So that's something else that I would suggest. Now you can see I've used different methods for connecting the motors as well. I've got these because I had them first, because of when I was hooking up FPV, I ordered a pack of like 20 of these, so I just used these leads, and I believe these are also called Micro-Losis, but these are like 1mm versus these are like 125 or 2mm, I'm not sure. And you can also use sockets. You can get sockets from Micromotor Warehouse. You can get them from Picnic Quads. You can get them from various places. Matter of fact, Picnic Quads, when they sell the SciSky board, you can also get that all soldered up already with sockets. Nice thing about sockets is that it does feel more sturdy, and it's a little less fidgety when plugging in those tiny little battery leads. So you have that benefit, and it also gives it a bit of a cleaner look too. So if you're looking at that, what you're looking at here is nothing special. This is a repair job. When I plugged a battery in that was reverse polarity, fried the 5-volt regulator, and the guys over at Multirotor Warehouse, namely Laz, came up with the idea of using a 5-volt regulator and adding it directly to the board in order to bypass the 5-volt regulator. You can, if you're interested in doing that, or you have one to repair yourself, you can look at that other video that I've got. Let's talk about motors for a second. I've only got the 2 sets to show you, and they're basically indistinguishable. We've got Multirotor Warehouse, or excuse me, Multirotor Superstore 80-2015s, and you've got the Hobby King 8mm motors that they sell. When you just look at them, they look identical. The only difference is the leads. I think the wires, as far as their polarity, are actually the same as well, but the leads are different. These motors will get you in the air if you've got a light enough frame. But once you start to add FPV gear, if you try to use a bigger battery, you're going to have troubles with thrust. These just don't have a high enough turn ratio. So I would suggest getting at least the Multirotor Warehouse, or I keep saying that, sorry. I would suggest at least getting the Multirotor Superstore batteries. These are $14.99 for a set. These are 80-2017s. They're really good batteries. I have gone through a few batches. I don't think they wear out any faster than any other brush motor, so don't worry about that. They're gonna last just as long as any other brush motor. Plus, they give you performance that is far better than the Hobby King. The one battery I don't have here to represent is the Multirotor Warehouse motors, specifically the Dark Edition, which are, he puts in quotes, speed insane. They're the dark motors, and they're supposed to have the highest turn ratio or kV of any of the motors that are 8mm out there. Something to consider, but those Multirotor Warehouse motors are $32 a set. I can get 2 of these and still have a cup of coffee in my pocket. So I tend to run these, and I get really good speed. Matter of fact, I never get the throttle pegged until my battery starts to sag, and I'm trying to get it in real quick to land. And as you can see from this camera, I spend a fair amount of time flying fast forward. I really try to get the nose down and get it running through the air. That's kind of the type of flight I enjoy. Props. Let me get some props out. So there's those, which I have yet to run these. I need to start trying them out. We've got the Hubsan Clears. Let me get a colored one out here. There's the Hubsans that are colored. And these are the ones from Hobby King, which are the 60mm. I don't have any of the 55mm from Hobby King. They're not good. I wouldn't bother with them. And you can also get Ladybird props. Walk Arrow Ladybird props are also good props, but I haven't got any of those. They're a bit pricey, and that's why I don't have any of them. I'm pretty happy with these clears. The colored ones, the things that are noted about the colored ones is that they break a lot easier. For whatever reason, the plastic they're molded out of, they tend to snap. And they also tend to come off the motor stems. Whereas these Hubsan Clears can be kind of difficult to get on, and always support your motors from the bottom when you're putting them on. But these props are just outstanding. They're flexible. I've actually had one bent up and just bent it back into shape and then set the quad down and take off flying. So if you're just building a first one, I'd recommend these because they're economical and they're going to take a beating. And if you get a little edge that's rough, all I do is I just take my fingernail and I just rub it out. If it's bent, bend it back. Usually if it's cracked, you probably won't even see it. It'll crack along the hub. Next thing you know, it flies off during your next crash, or if you attempt to flip or roll or something where it gets kind of violent, it'll just fly off. And when these things fly off, they're pretty much gone. You're not going to find them. So I think you can get I think it's 5 sets or 4 sets for $8, so not too expensive. These are no longer for sale from the Micromotor warehouse. They are kind of a carbon infused, so they're a little bit more rigid. And I believe this is what Benedict runs when he goes to races. He races his micros against 3 and 4S brushless quads, and this is what he uses on race day because they're a little bit more rigid, so you get a little bit of added stability, or not stability, agility, because the props won't give nearly as much. I mean, these are pretty flexible. These, not really. I think that would snap if I went too hard. And you also notice that these are drilled clear through. They not only have deep hubs, so it can sit down on the motor, but it's also drilled through. So if you have a landing that's upside down, it won't pop the end of the motor out. And that also brings me to why you see these little zip ties on the top. And I've put those on specifically to protect the motors and the FPV antenna. They're not going to completely protect it, but they're going to take a lot of the impact away. And the weight is less than a gram, and I thought it was worth it. Like in the case of this one, I was specifically worried about this antenna, and I have popped this off and repaired it, just a little solder. But this one, you know, it just kind of bounces and wiggles around, and when you're taking 60 grams and you land upside down, that's not a lot of weight, but this is also very small metal. And I used a bigger one on this one because I just had one spot I was going to put it in. And this one really takes a beating and helps protect that antenna. This was a $90 FPV pack, so I wanted to make sure I protected that investment. FPV gear. We've got kind of 3 different ways to go here. This is a backpack made by Gnarly, and he no longer sells those. At least he doesn't have any listings on the RC Group's classified FPV section for these, and I really liked it. It's got a good camera, high quality on it. It's got the channels. I mean, really good fine craftsmanship. It's got a nice light micro antenna on it that seems to be able to take a beating. Put some resin on the back of the camera to increase its rigidity, its ability to take a hit, because this one's sticking out on the nose, so I really appreciated that. He twisted the wires. You've also got the DIY FPV pack, which I've got made here. This is just I think it's a $9 camera from Banggood. I've got a Pololu in there that was, I think that one might be tunable, so that might be an $8 Pololu. Then you've got the FX7582 video transmitter, and then you've got what Banggood calls their micro or light antenna, which it is not by any stretch. It's taken a beating though, hasn't it? So you can build one of those, and you can find instructions for those online. This is a 200 milliwatt, this is 200 milliwatt, and then the last one is a 25 milliwatt, and this is a new one. You probably may have seen my video on this one. This is the Quanum Elite. This has 40 channels, so it has race band, which the others do not, but this is also only 25 milliwatt, so your range with this is going to be a little bit reduced, and you've still got the circular polarized antenna, which it does hold up pretty well. I've crashed this many times, and all I've done is pop the top, and I just soldered that back on. Didn't take much effort at all. This is $90. You can do this for about 30 bucks, the FPV, the DIY, and this one you can get for somewhere between $36 to $32. Maybe you have to pay as much as $41, depending upon how much you've bought from Hobby King already, because they do have member status based upon how much you've spent with them. So those are the 3 options I can present you with. I can tell you that the Micromotor Warehouse is going to be releasing a camera as well. It's an FPV backpack that's going to have a circular polarized antenna, and it's going to have a 120-degree lens on it. I don't think it's going to have race band. I think it's going to be 25 milliwatts though. I think it's going to be traditional, probably, 12 or 32 channel availability on that. So that's coming, and that's he stated during one of his workshops that that's probably going to be about 40 bucks. He's working with, I think it's Ready Made RC on that project. They're inserting a voltage regulator into it, and that's one of the bonuses of this one. Doesn't require a voltage regulator. It's got it built in. This one required it, and this one required it. You need that voltage regulator to make sure you have clean power, and therefore when you give it throttle, you don't get a bunch of lines in your view. Cleanflight. I'm not going to go into great detail about cleanflight, but it's relatively straightforward and easy to use. When it comes to your PIDs, that's kind of one thing you hear, and questions I get of what PIDs are you using, what PIDs are you using, and I don't think you want to use anybody else's PIDs. I think you really want to spend your time flying your quad and tuning it yourself, because they're all going to be different. They're all going to be maybe a little nose heavy or a little tail heavy, or they might be an X and all the weight's on the end, or it might, like this one's tail heavy and it's smaller, so it's going to fly a little bit differently, and therefore the PIDs are going to be different. Kind of the basics of PIDs is start with the defaults and start pumping them up. Start with P. Just start moving it up, moving it up, moving it up. I go 0.2 to 0.3 at a time, and I just do it. I do it in rate mode, and I just do it in-house here. And all I'm doing when I do PID tuning is I'm just flicking the stick. I got a transmitter here. I'll show you. All I'm doing is just giving it quick inputs, and I'm seeing how much it wobbles. I'm keeping it in the air, just hover it around, flick the stick. How much does it wobble? If it wobbles a little bit, then I give it a little bit more. If it wobbles more, then I give it a little bit less. The I, you need to increase it if you're flying in forward flight and you let go. If you're in rate mode, I don't fly in rate mode. I fly in horizon mode with the strength set at 2.5. But if you're tuning and you want to do it the way it's recommended, I believe, is that on the integral, you want to fly it forward, and then if it starts to creep up, you want to increase I to where it holds that. And you can also say the same thing. And then you want to tune D just a little bit to give it the minor changes, just to kind of lock everything in. You don't increase D all that much. Usually the defaults are pretty good, and that's how quickly it wants to make the changes. So when it's flying, does it go quick, or does it go fast, and does it lock into position? But the main thing you want to start with is P. P is going to give you the biggest change in flight, and there's no magic bullet when it comes to the PIDs. You just need to start with the defaults, work your way up. In rates, if you want to start to go into doing loops and rolls and other acrobatics, just increase your rates on your, not on your transmitter, but in cleanflight. And all the rates do is that means it moves more per your stick movement. So you can have a little bit of stick movement and gives it more. And you just keep going and keep going and keep going. I run my rates at 70, and that's works for me. I fly all the quads that way. I have them all configured the same way, and the loops are fine. I don't really even try them that much. I just tend to cruise around and shoot gaps. If you're just learning to fly, I would suggest you get a toy quad, one that has the housing all over it. You know, you can find one for 20 or 30 bucks, and its transmitter isn't a hobby grade, it's a lower grade, but just learn to hover that. And then you want to learn to hover it nose in. And once you have nose in and you've got standard hovering, you can start to do some circles inside, and then you should be, if you're really good at hovering nose in, you should be fine when you head outside, or if you wanted to pick up something that's going to fly a little faster, like one of these micro quads. And there's the RAD school of flight, and you can look that up on Google, which has got kind of a step-by-step for learning to fly quadcopters. It actually applies for helicopters, I believe, but it also applies for quadcopters. When it comes to your flight time, it's going to vary, of course, by battery. Hopefully you have a transmitter that you can set a timer on, whether it be a countdown, and then you can do a vibration, or you can go to the dollar store and buy a little timer. And what you're looking for is once your voltage starts to stag and you start getting at the top end just to kind of fly around, you need to bring that in. You'll feel it. you'll be all of a sudden pushing it up because you can't hardly get forward flight. You can't get that fast forward flight going. That's where you've kind of reached the end of your battery, and you need to set your timer to be about that time or 10-15 seconds shorter. And as far as batteries go, I started out flying these little guys that you find with a lot of toy quads, and they work okay, but you're not going to get really any punch out of these. This was my favorite, and it did better than a bunch of other generics I had like this. It had the best flight time, and it had the best punch, which was actually kind of minimal now compared to some other batteries that I've been running. But these will get you started. You can learn to fly on these, no problem. You get about 3 minutes out of a 380 milliamp on something like this. But since then, I started exploring other batteries, and I basically boiled my flying down to 3 batteries. And this one is a Venom Fly 500, which is a really good battery from Atomic RC. I think I bought 2 of them for $17, something like that. I ended up with, I've got like 6 of these now. These are good batteries. They're not my favorite though. When it comes to outside flying, these are really good. They do have plenty of punch, but they don't have the most punch. So when you need to make corrections, you're not going to quite get as much out of this as you will one of the others. But when it comes to flying, these are still very, very good batteries. The nice thing is they have 2 leads. You'll also notice that I've gone away. I used to use rubber bands to hold my batteries on, and I've gone to this low profile 3M Duralock, I believe it's called. And this stuff locks right in, and it, I mean, I'll just show you here real quick. I've got some on there. It's not going anywhere. And the reason why I switched, that wasn't even locked on all the way. The reason why I switched is I found that when I'd crash, my batteries half the time were hanging out. And sometimes if I had a crash that didn't even ground me, the battery had shifted and it had stopped one of the props, and that ended up grounding me. And you can get like 20 feet of this stuff for $10 from, I think it's finetapes.com. It's 3M low profile Duralock. This is 1/2 inch. This is a battery from Mylipo, mylipo.us or .de, and this one is the Voltamat 555. It's just rated a 30C. This is a good battery as well. It's a little bit better than this one, not by much, but just a little bit. It's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit lighter because it only has 1 lead. This one has 2, and this is the one I tend to fly on this quad quite a bit because it works out real nice, low profile. Like, it still sits flat and I have clearance there. I think these are about $7 from Mylipo. But my favorite battery is this one, nondescript 480 milliamp battery that's rated 4060C here. And I got this from the Micromotor Warehouse. And it's got the 18 gauge wire on there, which hopefully you can see that there. I think that focused. This has the best punch of all these batteries, and it's noticeable. It's not just a little bit, it's enough that it's noticeable, where you can actually make a height change relatively quickly. I notice it on takeoff that I can know blindly which battery I've got in based upon my takeoff. And this one gets me in the air about 6 to 8 feet higher and quicker than do the other 2. So I'm going to get some more of these. I've already got a couple, but I'm probably going to run these on just about everything it'll fit on. Good battery. I can't remember the price for sure, but I have a feeling it's about $7-8 too. And they have a warehouse in, I believe it's Austin, Texas, so you can get those relatively quickly in the States, and if you're overseas, they also ship out of Australia, so just select the right warehouse. Good battery. Okay, so there you have it. One last tip. Let me clear this all away. I hope I can get this in the shot. If you're doing much of these micros, you should probably get yourself some sort of storage component, and that's what I've been reaching over to. Is see if I can get this in the shot. I picked this up from Harbor Freight. It was about less than $10. It has all these different storage components, And I think if I were to organize a little bit better, I could actually use this to store quads in as well. Because you see these little dividers here, they hold everything into place. So when you've got it clicked around, even if you take out several of these cups, the cups don't move around when you're moving this pack. And you could actually, you know, put some quads in these spots. That one might not fit there, but you could shift these things around to where you could have your quads in there and possibly also fit your transmitter. So that's something you might want to keep your eye out as you're building up. You've got everything from props to old batteries I don't use, JSD connectors, motors, random little ends. Got some free advertising there for Mylipo. Unfortunately, the Multirotor Superstore and the micromotor warehouse stuff is underneath that, and some random packaging and connector ends all over there. So that's the pack that I use to keep all my stuff in. It generally sits still, but if I were to go to a flying event or want to go spend an afternoon flying with someone else somewhere, I could just take this, throw my tools in it, and I would be all set. Last thing I cover, I know I probably said that the storage chest was the last thing, but the last thing is my controller. Is a simple Devo 7E. They're about 65 bucks, and they are DSM compatible when you flash the Devention software on there. This is like many transmitter, this is got a processor in it, and it's got storage, so you can actually flash something else to this. And the people at the Devention software, devention.org, they have the ability, they give you the ability to flash their software on it, which makes this DSM, DSMX compatible. You probably also notice I've got an extra antenna up there. This is quite a flexible radio as well, because there are different radios and modules you can add. There are all sorts of instructions online. The one downside of this is that it's small. So if you're used to bigger radios, this one might feel a little bit awkward. And I initially had some difficulties getting used to it. You know, I'd fly toy quads just with the thumbs because they're so imprecise anyways. But I fly my micros that I build kind of using a hybrid pinching style. And it is somewhat small. I think it would be a bit more comfortable if it was a bit bigger. But for the price, you know, you only get 2 switches. You can do a switch mod to get a third switch for your different flight modes if you wanted. But it works very good. It also takes, let me see if I can get it out here quickly. You can put a LiPo battery in there. This is actually made specifically for the Devo E. I think this was about 12 bucks. So you charge it, put it in there, you're set to go for flying for several hours. So that's a nice thing. I would suggest if you're just getting into quads, pick one of these up, do your research, add the modules for the models that you're going to be flying. If you're doing the training bit where you're doing kind of learning how to fly with a toy quad, and then you can flip that right over into a micro. Well, you can flip that over to a micro if you're going to be using the SciSky board. Okay, well, I don't think I have anything else to contribute to your micro building. I do have some things planned still yet coming up. I plan to get one of those cameras I mentioned from the micro motor warehouse, test them out and see how well they work. And anything new when it comes to micros. I really enjoy these. They're very convenient for me. I've got kids many times. I can't leave the house because I'm home alone or I've got to take kids somewhere, but I can take one of these to soccer practice and I can fly it around discreetly around a jungle gym or off in some trees or something, and I can fly this in the backyard a whole lot, whereas a larger quad is just going to take more consideration. Going to have to have more time. I'm going to need more setup, and I'm probably going to want to be gone longer because I don't want to be flying for an hour and then have to spend 30 minutes driving back or something like that. So that is a huge benefit to me in my enjoyment of this hobby, is flying these micros just about wherever I am. They're light, they're not really dangerous, so you're not going to hurt any people or property. So you can fly them most of the time, but be respectful of others if they ask you not to. If you're out and around others and they ask you not to fly, just bring it in, or go 50 yards off in one direction to where they aren't and fly it over there. So if you have any questions or comments, leave those in the section down below. I'll do my best to answer them. If you have any other tips you'd like to add, go ahead and add them in the comments. Hopefully other people read them. If I come up with something that's really mind-bending, I may even add a notation up here or something like that, or make a separate video about the tips that I get sent. I had one tip was less hot glue, and yeah, maybe I could use hot glue, but until I find some evidence that hot glue is dragging me down, I'm probably still going to use it. Alright, thanks for watching everyone, and subscribe for more videos. Alright, sorry, I'm back again. I had one more thing that I'd forgotten to talk about, and that is, if you're going to make an investment in batteries, I know these are more expensive than the ones you can get where you can get like 5 for 17 bucks, but you need to charge these properly. The chargers that you get with the toy quads and the little generic batteries, they aren't good for your batteries. And this is the one that I use all the time, and I know that many other people use this. I made a video previously about this. So get a decent charger. 40, 50 bucks. You're going to be spending, if you're like me, I spend about $100 on batteries. It's worth having a charger. This does not have the ability to storage charge. What you have to do is you have to watch the readout to see that your voltage is about 3.82, 3.85, and then you stop the charge at that point. It's recommended you store them at storage charge, especially if you're not going to be flying. I would say if you're not going to fly for 4 or 5 days or maybe even a week, probably be worth the effort to putting your batteries on storage charge and then coming back to them and giving them a full charge later on. So that's my final tip. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more videos.